This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, NIL Game Changers, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
To save you money. They update because customer service means everything to them. They are great people who are great pros. All at Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. We open the show today with my good friend John Sauber from the Center Daily Times. John, first of all, how have you been?
I have been delightful, Steve. Actually just got back from a week of vacation, did some golfing, and can't really ask for much more.
Well, congratulations, by the way, in the single-digit handicap. That's fabulous.
There is no chance that is true. But you know, we live in the high 20s.
Okay. Well, hey, at least you're out there having fun and doing it.
That's right.
Penn State had an opportunity for people to at least talk. You know, you had a chance to talk to coaches last week. Live for Life happened as well. I know this all works around your vacation. But what's the general read that you get when you went through the comments that were made in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so it was interesting. We talked to James last Thursday, as you mentioned. We talked to the assistants right after that, which, like you said, was a nice little send-off before I went. But I thought there was a lot of confidence from the various assistants that I spoke to in their specific position groups. But it was a what's the word I'm looking for? It was rather calm, though. You know what I mean? Like there was no. Nobody was worried about a position group. Nobody was expressing concern over things. James was relatively run-of-the-mill. There was no major storyline coming out of anything. So I thought it was a really. It feels like everything is flying under the radar, I guess, a little bit more this offseason than maybe in off-seasons past.
And when you look at that, you know, because it was very businesslike. I think that's the best way I thought of it.
Yep.
When you look at that and everybody is taking that kind of attitude, especially the under-the-radar part, how much does it benefit, especially now with a 12-team playoff, that you enter in a little bit under the radar?
Yeah, I honestly think that's huge for this team this year, right? Because you look at a lot of the main figures in the program this year, there are a lot of stress points and a lot of pressures that a lot of these guys are facing that if they were more under the microscope could get overwhelming, right? Like you talk about someone like Drew Aller, who was really good last year, and especially for a first-time starter, he's going into a year that it maybe is not make or break for him, but where people have really high expectations for him. And him in this program not being so pressured to be, you know, one of the top 4 teams, I think will really help him and other guys on the team kind of be themselves and play how they play without the expectations that, okay, it's got to be 12-0, 11-1 at worst. You know, I do think a 10-2 team will make the playoff. I said earlier this offseason that I thought a 9-3 team might end up making the playoffs. So not having the stress of needing to win every single game, of course they're going to want to, of course they're going to try to, but not having that as, you know, everything is make or break, I think will really help this program this year.
John, how intrigued are you? Because the schedule is going to be different. You have a UCLA, Washington, USC games. They're all conference games along the way. How intrigued are you by that?
Yeah, it's still really strange, right? Like I look at the schedule and I'm used to, you know, the Pac-12 and you know, there being a Power 5, and you look and you see those teams on the schedule and it just feels different, right? It'll be cool, I think, for fans from Penn State, you know, and other programs too, to see these kind of matchups, but that first game against UCLA will be the first one for Penn State against one of these programs. And I'll be curious to see what it's kind of like, right, how UCLA deals with the cross-country travel, and then how Penn State deals with it not long after that, heading to USC. So I think the travel is the biggest question mark here and how it's going to impact how these teams play, because we see it in the NFL, but there's more time to travel before a game in the NFL, right? You have more leeway to get out there. This is not really like that, and it's not like bowl games, because bowl games guys have a chance, to be like for the Rose Bowl, they're out there for a week, right, if not more, to adjust their body clocks to the time. This is you're in and you're out. It's a business trip.
Right, no question about that. People have talked about the wide receivers. And let's face it. I mean, it's a proper talking point. How do you view them and the pressure on them heading into the season? And when you had a chance to talk to Marcus Hagans, what was your thought there?
Yeah, I thought Marcus handled himself really well, as he always does, and he did a good job of explaining how, yes, they hear all that noise, right, that you mentioned, that it's this talking point. They all hear it. They're human. Of course they hear it, but they use that to motivate them, right? And they use it to channel it properly. And he even talked about how he gets it motivates him because he doesn't want to be talked about as like a weak point of the team or anything like that. He wants to be, one of the reasons that, and he wants the position group to be one of the reasons that the program is finding success. So I thought he had kind of channeled all that stuff properly. We talked to him about guys like Julian Fleming, who obviously is the big addition that everyone will point to, replacing Keandre Lambert-Smith in some ways as the veteran in the room. I'll be curious to see what his role ends up looking like, but I think there's no doubt that his role off the field has been pretty big. He mentioned when I sat down for a one-on-one with him that Liam Clifford has also stepped up in a leadership role, but I think part of that probably happened because Fleming is facilitating that, right? He's creating a culture in that room. That's going to be really big because they have a ton of talent in the room, especially younger guys that I think need to take a step forward. But they also have someone in Trey Wallace who has been really good when he's played. He's just got to stay healthy like Fleming does, and I think they have a shot to be really impactful this year. Now, what does that mean? Is it putting together a 1,000-yard season for anyone? Probably not. But I think that Wallace could have a relatively big year, and I think could vault himself into a higher round draft status than he has been previously. But all in all, this group, I think, has to, as a whole, improve. Everyone has to take steps forward on their own, and it can't just be one guy stepping up because then you're just drawing the attention of them and the rest of the group is still falling behind. So I think there needs to be that the tide has to rise across the board, and they have to get improvement pretty much out of everyone.
John, what about the coordinator part of it with Andy Koltanicki coming in, Tom Allen, Justin Lustig? That's all three coordinators. I don't know if you're looking for anything dramatic, but what are some of the subtle things that you're looking for out of all three phases?
Yeah, I think with the offense, it's how are the team's best players maximized? To me, that is Drew Allard, that is Katron Allen, that is Nick Singleton, and that's Tyler Warren and Trey Wallace, right? Like, those are the guys that you want to see put in a position to succeed if you're a Penn State fan. And I am assuming, based on the way that Koltanicki has spoken, both in the availability last week and when I sat down with them, that is the emphasis, right? It's about prioritizing the team's best players and getting them the ball and giving them a chance to succeed. And I know it sounds simple and obvious, but I don't know that was always the case last year, especially at the midpoint of the season. But I think that will be the case moving forward, and that's important. As far as the defense, I think this is, to me anyways, a little bit more of a shift than maybe some will expect. This is, to me, a true 4-2-5, right? That line position that the Tom Allen used to call the Husky when he was at Indiana is more of a safety than it is a linebacker. I know it's a safety linebacker hybrid, but I would look for that position to have more safety responsibilities than typical linebacker ones. It'll allow Penn State to play its three best at safety and move those guys around and get their best 11 on the field. As far as special teams, I'm just interested to see how these things shake out with the kicker competition, right? Like that you have to replace Alex Falcons, and you need to find someone reliable out there because those points can really matter down the stretch of games, especially when you anticipate some of these big games being close.
All right, so you have people that are established in the program. They're established playmakers in the program. Do you have a couple of guys on each side of the ball that subtly, maybe under the radar, that can be contributors and help make this a really successful season beyond the guys that are in the, quote, the star category?
Yeah, I think Caden Saunders is someone on offense especially that really stands out to me, right? He came in with the hype, 5-star talent, maybe didn't see it turning to production right away, but you've seen improvements there, especially last year. I thought there were flashes of him being a legitimate starter for this team, and he's someone in the slot that can be really dynamic. He's a really good athlete and is stronger, I think, than he probably gets credit for. He's the guy on offense that I think if he takes a step forward, it can really transcend what this offense is going to do and can be really impactful. As far as the defense, KJ Winston's the obvious guy that gets all the attention at safety, as he should. He's very good. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. But Zaquie Wheatley is someone that I think will really benefit from playing in Tom Allen's system, right? Like, I think he's probably that third safety and someone that can, really be a playmaker on the ball. When it goes up, he goes and gets it, and he goes and finds it. He's not shy as a tackler either, which I think has been a problem at safety for different programs around the country, but I don't think Penn State has that issue at all with Winston, Wheatley, and Reed. But yeah, those two guys in particular stand out to me as they can kind of really, I expect them to contribute. If they go from contributing to, being a, just below a star level player, I think it could have a big impact on Penn State this year.
All right, so moving forward, money, of course, is always going to be a big part of this. We'll do this in several phases. Let's start with the Beaver Stadium expansion, or not expansion, the renovation part of it. What is your thought? Now, I know there are only a couple of renderings out there, but what's your thought on that moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's desperately needed, right? Like, I think the aesthetic, I know some people like the steel beams and the structure itself, but I think for a while the stadium has needed something to make it look not even more modern, but more less like just a construction project, right? Like less make it look more appealing, quite frankly, for people that are coming into town and looking at it. So I think that it's desperately needed. I think we all know that the improvements and the structure and everything like that are needed, right? Like, it's just got to be in a position where there aren't going to be maintenance needs moving forward. I'll be curious to see what it ends up looking like, what capacity ends up being and everything like that. But I think it's smart to, I know not all fans will want to hear this, but I think it's probably smart to prioritize the revenue, because we are heading toward revenue sharing, and programs are going to need increased sources of revenue moving forward.
Well, you're talking about $22 million, just as a starting number. In the next 10 years, it could reach $30 million in terms of revenue sharing, which now brings up the next one. The NCAA basketball tournament is looking at two models right now, one to expand to 72, the other one to 76. Keep in mind that part of the House settlement is that NCAA distributions are going to be reduced somewhat to schools across the board. Is this a potential to make up for that by expanding the tournament?
I think that is, if not the motivating factor, it's got to be one of the motivating factors, right? I personally love the tournament. I love college basketball. I'm not one to complain about adding, 4 to 8 teams or whatever it ends up being, just because it does increase some of that upset potential, some of the fun, some of the reason we all love March Madness. I do think it can get to a point where it's too much, right? I don't want to see 128 teams or anything like that in the NCAA tournament. But, yeah, I think this is, there are going to be things like this that we notice probably over the next few years that the NCAA does to kind of increase that revenue. We're seeing it with the potential for sponsorships and stadiums and logos and everything like that on the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more stuff like that moving forward.
Yeah, because, look, if they were to do what remember there was the committee and they made a recommendation, and they recommended that all NCAA championships outside of the college football playoff have 25% participation. Well, in the NCAA basketball tournament, that'd be 90 schools. And I'm with you, John. That's way too many. 72 to 76, I could live with it, and I could live with it for the reasons that they're talking about. And I would just say, just do 76 now, because that way you don't just mess around and then do it later. Might as well just do it right out of the gate. But that's how I view it.
Yeah, I think that would be. It does feel like something that if they go to 72, that they will inevitably just go to 76 anyways. I think you're 100% right. Right, just rip the Band-Aid off now, go to 76, and don't mess with it and realize, it should have been 4 more teams than we originally planned, and then inevitably do it anyways. I think it's better to just do it right away, like you said, and get there and be done with it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's all about revenue. And now we get to logos on the field. How do you feel about logos on the field, which looks like it's going to happen based on what they've done? And they have not done anything yet about doing the logo on the jersey of some sort, like the NBA. Well, everybody does it. The Yankees have Star Insurance, for goodness sakes. The Celtics are Vista Print. The Mavericks are Chime. How do you view that in this current climate?
Yeah, I think the on the field was kind of inevitable, right? It's an obvious way to draw in a lot of revenue, but not be too obstructive, right? Like, I don't think we're going to see them everywhere. I think the way that it's currently set out to have one big one and two kind of smaller ones is good and kind of makes it more subtle and less of a hindrance on what you're looking at. The jersey stuff, I'm kind of surprised it hasn't gotten there already. Like you said, there are professional teams doing this everywhere. Soccer's been doing this, for a long time. I think teams, and this is probably not a consideration, but maybe it should be when teams agree to these things, there really should be more effort put into making sure that the color scheme of the company matches your company or matches your own color scheme, right? Like, you want this to look normal and natural. I remember when the Sixers first got the StubHub logo on theirs, that you kind of didn't even notice it because it just blended right in. And so I think that has to be, or should be, a priority, especially for the aesthetic of everything.
Yeah, the only one I've seen that doesn't do that is Love's Truck Stops, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that's because of the big yellow heart. Okay. I mean, that's the one I think of, like, okay, that's a little bold. So, hey, we're at that point now. That's where this is. How do you, just in general, John, this is all being mandated by court settlements, so I got that part. But how do you feel about the new model of college sports moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's probably necessary at this point, right, to be in a place where it's treated more professionally, because I think in some ways it's always teetered toward more professionally than amateur, especially with the amount of hours guys put in, right? Like these, and men and women in college sports are putting in full-time jobs, right? Essentially, as when you talk about practice and treatment and training and everything like that, that you're putting in a ton of time. And so I think it was kind of inevitable for this to happen. It's probably best that it happens quickly. That way there's less chance for the NCAA to get involved and mess things up, right? Like you can kind of create a more sustainable model that feels like something that can be that can last for a while. I am curious to see is, transfer portals inevitably the windows get abolished and guys can, and men and women can transfer whenever they want. That what it looks like when if someone enters the portal in, say, late September, early October, like, do they join the next program right away? Like, how does that work with scholarships and everything? So I'm curious to see what it ends up looking like. But yeah, I think especially it became increasingly clear in recent years that this was inevitable, and probably the quicker the better, so it can become so people can get adjusted, right? Because when you can kind of take care of all of it at once and be like, hey, this is what it's going to look like, I think people can then dive back in and understand it a little better.
I think we're teetering toward contracts, which would prevent what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a potential here that I think everyone is probably monitoring at this point.
Yeah, and the other part about 72 versus 76, remember, there's no Pac-12. All the major conferences have expanded. That means only one automatic bid has been lost. And because of that, the power conferences are now looking at saying, hey, wait a minute. For example, Oregon doesn't make the NCAA tournament last year, right? Because they got the automatic bid. Colorado would have been teetering. You may have two power conference teams that wouldn't make the tournament under the current 68 structure because the Power Five is now the Power Four and condensed.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I have seen, rightfully so, get the most pushback with this is the idea of, I've seen some, I think there's been coaches that have said that there shouldn't be automatic bids. That is the one thing that should absolutely never go away with the NCAA tournament. That is part of what makes it fun. Nobody wants to see 76 Power 4 teams, you know what I mean, inevitably making the NCAA tournament. We want those types of mid-majors, those low majors having that shot.
You are so right. John, always a pleasure. Glad you had a great vacation. Glad you took time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Steve. Always appreciate it.
John Sauber, Center Daily Times. This half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Spring has sprung, and it's time to dust off those insurance policies. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855 or visit our website at purdyinsurance.com to see what we can do for you.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And this half hour is brought to you by NIL Game Changers, the ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness opportunities for both athletes and businesses. Start your journey today at nilgamechangers.org as we continue from the Sunbury Motors Studio. All right, so let's get to several items that are on the table. Let's start with this one. Congressional committee this morning voted to move forward with a bill that would prevent college athletes from being deemed employees of their schools. The vote in the U.S. House Committee on Education and the Workforce represents the first tangible signs of progress the college sports industry has made in its years-long push for a federal law to help reshape college sports. And this, of course, is all after the House settlement. The bill was introduced by Congressman Bob Good, a Republican from Virginia. And he introduced the bill on the same day that the antitrust settlement was announced. And again, all this is still in the early stages, but it got through committee. It is probably going to face opposition from Democrats in the Senate, as well as legal challenges if it is passed. We all know that Dartmouth men's basketball is put in to be employees, and the regional office of the National Labor Relations Board has recognized them, but Dartmouth has not recognized their union. There is also I think it's Johnson versus USC, and that is the one that's not settled. There were 4 cases involving the NCAA. Johnson versus USC was another one. I think the NCAA may be a co-defendant or something. And that's one that would deem athletes to be employees. Now, the settlement that's been put forward by House hasn't formally been approved by Judge Claudia Wilkin yet. Charlie Baker, the head of the NCAA, said, "I've had a lot of conversations with people in Congress. The reason we're interested in employment is because of the compensation question. If the court blesses the antitrust settlement, then it puts us in a position where we can go to Congress and say one of the three branches of the federal government bless this as a model to create compensation without triggering employment. In other words, the judicial branches said yes. The bill is intended to be a narrow part of a broader package of federal legislation that guarantees more benefits for athletes in the future while preventing them from being employees. Okay. Now, it should be pointed out that no partner bills that would guarantee athlete benefits have been introduced yet. The Workforce and Education Committee voted 23-16 to move the bill forward. But it was all party lines. All 23 votes in favor were from Republicans. All 16 votes against it were from Democrats. The debate over whether Congress should weigh in on college sports business model has been a partisan debate for the past several years. Democrats in the House and Senate have previously co-sponsored bills that would have the exact opposite effect of the good bill, codifying college athletes' right to unionize. Those lawmakers and others and other advocates say athletes need the ability to bargain collectively to make sure they can negotiate for items such as improved medical care and a fair share of the money they generate for a multi-billion-dollar industry. See, that's always tricky. Here's where it's tricky in that part. On the surface, that sounds great because when you hear that, right, get a fair share of the money they generate for a multi-billion-dollar industry. Okay. And what's the first thing you think of? You think of college football and the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Well, to be honest with you, what money is generated by anybody else? Oh, they all get revenue. So let's not play that game, the non-revenue generating sports. They all generate revenue. But they also generate massive expenses. That is why they all lose money. And we can't play the mythology narrative. We can't play that. I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to allow that in the show. We're not going to play the mythology narrative. And the mythology narrative is this. Don't tell me, oh, no, they make money here. No, the women's basketball tournament's getting all in. The NCAA wrestling, no. You're losing money. Okay? You have to tell the truth. If you're going to have an honest, reasonable, intelligent, let's go to the intelligent part, debate, you have to be using facts. The NCAA women's basketball tournament, despite tremendous attendance success, tremendous rating success, okay? So notice the praise. Now let's go to the reality. Lost more money than all the other NCAA tournament, all the other NCAA championships combined. Welcome to the world of reality. So this last part here, okay? A fair share of the money they generate for a multi-billion-dollar industry. The money is generated by two sports. It is not generated by the other sports. Oh, they all bring in money, but not enough to make them self-sufficient. So how do you split? I mean, in other words, how do you split on this? How do you make the whole thing work? In a business that's losing money, how do okay? The wrestling business loses money. The women's basketball business loses money. The softball business loses money. The baseball business, I mean, I just go through them all. They lose money. So they aren't generating money for a multi-billion-dollar industry. They're costing it. So how do you now split and parse this? Representative Lori Tran, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, played college volleyball. Has been an active participant in the Capitol Hill debate. Said that she will vote against Good's bill if it does reach the House floor. She said, once again, Republicans in Congress have decided to plow forward with legislation to limit the rights of college athletes with little or no input from athletes themselves. But again, as successful as women's volleyball is, it is a massive, people love to watch it. It generates ratings on TV. It's a great championship for ESPN to carry, and it loses money. In the latest reporting at Penn State, women's volleyball, I think, lost about $1.3 to $1.5 million in the latest. Okay, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the money wrestling loses. I have no problem with the money women's basketball loses. I have no problem with the money women's volleyball loses. None. I have no problem with the money baseball loses. None, because you can make up for it with what you're doing in football and basketball. The whole place is not running a deficit. So I have no problem with the losses. But when you go back to the sentence of, okay, a fair share of the money generated from a multi-million-dollar industry. Well, Congressperson Lori Tran, the sport you played in is popular, people enjoy it, and it doesn't make money. It doesn't end up in the black, it's in the red. So what's your share of the deal here? Paula McDonald is the lead attorney for the plaintiffs in the Johnson case. That's the one I just brought up, so it's in here. The Johnson case. Johnson versus the NCAA. He said that if the bill were to be enacted, it would never survive a judicial challenge. McDonald said, to wit, it's a waste of time. Dilatory tactics have consequences. The only thing accomplished by the NCAA in needlessly dragging out the recognition of college athletes as hourly employees, like their fellow students, is to significantly increase the cost of resolution borne by its membership. Good said his bill was aimed at making sure the tradition of college sports wasn't ruined by reclassifying student athletes as employees. My legislation will help maintain a balance between athletics and academics, ensuring that college sports programs remain viable, beneficial, and enjoyable for all student athletes. That sounds nice, but I don't know if that's realistic in the current atmosphere. Which then brings up the NCAA tournament. So now let's get to that. Matt Norlander wrote the piece on the NCAA tournament. Mike DeCourcy was on this show, a week ago? Something like that. And Mike said that the House settlement versus the NCAA, what it did was ensure the viability of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Because the House settlement entails back pay for those in the case, like from 2017 to 21 or something like that. I think that's the dates that it happened to be in. Okay. So they have to come up with a way to put a dent in the loss, because some of that's going to come out of NCAA distribution. Several coaches had said to me post-pandemic that they had to tighten their belts, in part because the NCAA distribution from the tournament that was not played in 2020 cut down on the amount of money everybody could spend. That's how important that tournament distribution has to be. Can, excuse me, can the Penn States, Texas, USC, Notre Dame, can they get by with a lesser distribution because of the settlement? Yeah. The problem is, can Bucknell? Can Holy Cross? Can St. Francis of Pennsylvania? Can Coastal Carolina? Can Murray State? Can they get by with less? They don't have FBS football dollars. They don't have the college football playoff dollars. They can't make up for it in other ways. And because they can't make up for it in other ways, that means they absorb pain financially. And that's a big problem. So how do you make up for it? There's only so many corporate dollars out there. For some reason there seems to be this feeling that there's just an unlimited amount of corporate money out there. Like, I don't think so. There is a limit to everything. So now, how do you find more money? Well, one possibility is that not for the upcoming season, but maybe as soon as 25-26, the NCAA tournament itself expands, maybe to 76 teams. So Matt Norlander said that on Wednesday, NCAA officials presented conference commissioners with at least two different models, one for 72, one for 76. If passed, the NCAA's plans for the tournament expansion would not take effect until 25-26. It would keep the core 64-team bracket intact, adding additional play-in games and at least one more first four site. And, of course, expansion of the women's tournament would then follow. Additional tournament games could be a way to, quote, increase revenue as schools seek to offset financial costs of the recent House versus NCAA decision. There's also the other part, too. In the current structure, one at-large bid has been lost. Excuse me, my apologies. In the current structure, one automatic bid has been lost. That's the Pac-12. Oh, wait, Oregon State and Washington State are still the Pac-12. No, they're playing in the WCC for basketball. So one has been lost. You've had consolidation now from 5 conferences to 4. I think those conferences would like to see a few more at-large bids handed out. Remember what the recommendation had been years ago, and Greg Sankey was part of this group that said NCAA championships maybe should have, and it was only one of those brainstorming idea deals, and they said 25% of schools should make NCAA championships. And they were talking about all championships, except for the college football playoff. 25% in women's lacrosse, 25% in field hockey, 25% in men's soccer. I mean, that's what they were talking about, that model. Well, that also meant 25% in men's and women's basketball. There are 363 teams, 363 schools that compete in men's and women's basketball. That would mean they have a 90-school NCAA basketball tournament. And by the way, I think women's volleyball is the same thing. I think women's volleyball, they have 100% participation. You're talking about 363 women's volleyball schools. Right? That'd be 90 in the tournament. Well, I'm against 90 in the tournament. It's too many. If you gave me a choice between 76 and 90, I would pick 76. But if you give me a choice between 72 and 76, I still pick 76. And the reason is 90's too many. If you're debating between 72 and 76 now, just go with the bigger number because eventually you want to go there anyway. You might as well just do it as soon as possible. The question would be whether you can get more money from TV partners or an additional TV package for those first 4 games And it could possibly be streaming from Amazon. If it's a part, if CBS and TBS do not want to do it, or kick in the additional money to do it. But the key to doing it is to get the additional money, which would then in turn, it would do two things. It would add more at-large bids. That would satisfy the power conferences. But the addition of money would then be going into the pockets of the schools, which would then put a dent into any reduction they'll have to pay the next 10 years because of the House settlement. That's why I think it's worthy of looking at, because you've got to come up with a way to reduce the pain, not just to the power teams, but to reduce the pain to the Bucknells, the Purdue Fort Waynes, even the Big East schools. Butler, Villanova, the whole thing, they're not going to be. Those schools can't pay $22 million. And they also can't have their NCAA distribution knocked down because they don't get any college football playoff money. They don't qualify. Illinois' Hawkins transfers to Kansas State in $2 million NIL deal. I have sources that tell me it was definitely less than that. Just so you know. Good sources. It was, in fact, might be significantly less than that. We'll come back with more in a moment. You're on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by NIL Game Changers.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is, because it's Brewers Outlet time. The beverage supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping. Don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
You want your young athlete to get the most out of life and NIL. You need a roadmap, a strategic approach. NIL Game Changers help student athletes earn while they learn in their collegiate journey. Driven by former student athletes and coaches who work as NIL sports agents and content media designers, they'll guide both student and family, starting with high school students looking toward college and those already in college. Get a seasoned team of marketing experts with a background in athletics and coaching. Visit NILGameChangers.org, the ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness opportunities.